This is Tell Your Story Alaska. We talk aviation, history, theology, but most of all, the raw stories of Alaskans and the gospel. All right, welcome back to another episode of Tell Your Story Alaska. This will be part 2 with Ellis, and when we finished part 1, we stopped recording. You and I just started chatting. You started telling me some stories, and so I thought, hey, would you want to just record some more and start telling some of your commercial fishing stories? And you said, yeah. So we broke for lunch. We chatted about it, and now we're back. This episode is just for fun. And for Ellis to just tell some of his most memorable fishing stories, and we actually came up with a good list.
Yeah, right on. And
so we're just going to kind of go through the list. I also thought it'd be interesting. I looked up on this website here just some basic facts about the fishing industry. This is called the Resource Development Council, akrdc.org, and I just got some basic facts here which are really interesting about the commercial fishing industry in Alaska. And it says that there's over 3 million lakes in Alaska and 12,000 rivers. And then you and I were wondering about what these numbers mean, about how much shoreline there is. But there's more shoreline in Alaska than in the rest of the U.S. combined. And I thought that was quite interesting. Some other interesting facts were that Alaska is surrounded on 3 sides by 3 different oceans. Or seas, at least. There's the Arctic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and the Bering Sea. And it boasts over 40% of the nation's surface water. That actually kind of blew me away. 40% of the surface water in the U.S. is Alaska. Alaska produces 60% of the nation's commercial fisheries. There's a vast array of seafood, including all 5 species of Pacific salmon, 4 species of crab, Pacific cod, various types of ground fish, shrimp, herring, sablefish, pollock, and Pacific halibut are all harvested from Alaska. The fishing industry directly employs 58,700 people, an additional 10,000 secondary jobs, and every year it's over a $5 billion industry. And so far it looks like Dutch Harbor is the #1 fishing port in the country by quite a large margin, actually. So I thought all of that was interesting. Oh, and then it says somewhere else on here that there's about 9,000 fishing vessels in Alaska every year. Mm-hmm. And so your vessel is one of those 9,000?
It's actually 2 of them.
2 of those 9,000. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you
have a skiff.
Yeah, so you've contributed.
I'm a member of the community.
We've just doubled how much you contribute. Yeah. And you also employ 4 people. So of the 58,000 some, you have 4 of those.
Yeah, my little family of...
Yeah. Your little niche. So let's dive into your first stories. This is all about fun and just hearing your cool stories out in the boat. So which one in our list did you want to start with?
I think I want to start with False Pass. In fact, what you were just talking about with the different oceans actually brings up a really cool... So I'll kind of jump in with something we hadn't talked about, and then we'll get on and talk about that kind of specific night. But there's a place called False Pass, which if any of you guys want to look up, I think it's a really fascinating spot. It's the first navigable water between the the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea.
No.
So it's the first place you can cross the Aleutians. And it's always, we have to go through False Pass twice a year as we go from our seining gig to our tendering gig. And it's always such an experience because you only travel through the pass for about 3 hours out of a run that takes 3.5, 4 days. So it's this really brief period. There's a harbor and a small cannery town in there. But on one side, you're in the Pacific Ocean, and everything is really blue and deep. I mean, it's 400, 500 feet deep, and, there's these beautiful seamounts. So you'll be traveling along, and you'll see the bottom just come screaming up at you, and you'll go, from 400 feet of water to 70 feet of water, which feels
An underwater mountain, basically. What do you call them? Seamounts.
Yeah, it's really
sea mountain. Yeah,
yeah, it's scary. We have this reef we cross. We call Freaky Deaky because you watch the bottom come up from 400 feet to about 10, and it really feels like you're about to run aground.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's the Pacific side, and then you go into this little pass, and in the pass there's a bunch of sandbars and a little bit of village, and when you come out the Bering side, the deepest water you're really going to see is maybe 80 feet deep. I mean, we're not out in the crab grounds, which even those are only a couple 100 feet deep. And everything is flat, and it's brown, and it's tundra, and it's muddy. And like the water is different, the depth is different, the bottom is different. You can actually run aground really safely because it's all mud and sand.
Okay.
The weather's different, and so it's this really stark transition that we love to tell our crew. Here it goes. And like when we run back to Kodiak and you come back through Falls Pass into the Pacific, it's always such a breath of fresh air because you go from this brown, muddy terrain to big, beautiful cliffs and bright blue water and all the seabirds and otters. And so it's a pretty cool place. But this last year, we were leaving the bay, and I needed to, when we're traveling, it's all about weather windows. So I can, we have Windy's, the app we always use.
Oh, yeah, I use that one too.
Yeah, it's a great thing.
It is.
So I have a good idea of what's where, and we're always wanting to travel, less than 15 knots would be great. Anything more. The boat's safe all the way up to 50 or 60 knots, but it's just miserable. You get beat up. You just get thrown around all day. And so I had mapped out my time, and I knew I had to push the boat a little bit hard because there was a 45-knot blow coming from Kamchatka into the Bering Sea, which was going to be snot weather because you have this kind of shallow, gradual bottom. Yeah. And so you see really steep, stacked up waves. And there's a lot of tide in the Bering Sea and Bristol Bay area. So I knew the weather was going to be coming in from the northwest, and we were running in from the northeast towards Falls Pass. And I had figured we had about an hour of margin. And it was going to happen in the middle of the night. So my crew woke me up maybe 40 minutes outside of Falls Pass as it was just getting dark. And so I took over, and I was running at the buoys. And you travel through, we call them these gates. There's navigation buoys, and you have to go between these sets of buoys so that you can follow the channel, because there's a lot of sandbars in Falls Pass. And went through the first set of buoys, and I turned the corner in. It's completely dark at this point. It starts to rain. And within half an hour, it's blowing 45. It's raining sideways,
It just changed that fast.
Just boom.
And that's kind of common, isn't it?
That was a pretty... Normally you see a little bit of a gradient. I mean, you'll see within an hour or two, you can see significant weather change. But that particular storm went from beautiful, flat, calm sunset, took a nap, woke up at midnight or 1 in the morning, turned the corner in, and it was just boom, this is ugly. And came in, and I'm having to look for these buoys, so I have all my lights on, but then it's raining so hard I can barely see out of the boat. So then I'm sitting up there kind of having to squeeze through. The weather came up, and I ran in. I think Kate stayed up with me, but I ran in, I made all the gates. And by the time we pulled into the harbor in Falls Pass, which we had known it was going to get bad, so we were headed for the harbor no matter what. By the time I pulled in, it was raining sideways. It was really gross. And we get the boat tied up at the dock, and I came out, and now we're in the harbor, so things feel, it's quiet, it's safe. There's all these beautiful lights. There's a bunch of fleet tucked in there because everyone knows the storm is coming. And it smelled like gunpowder. And we went out and looked at the deck, and there was... I had noticed when I went up and down the ladder a couple of times there was some grit, and was wondering, why is the deck gritty? Boats don't get dirty. And we came in the harbor lights and looked down, and the whole boat was just covered in volcanic ash. And a volcano right outside of Falls Pass had erupted.
Wow.
Right as we ran by. It was a small eruption. I doubt many people in the world experienced it. Maybe 2 or 3 boats drove through its ash cloud because it was raining so hard it dropped all the ash, but it covered the boat in ash. And that feeling of just being alone, but finally safe and secure in such a grand expression of the world and the power of nature, and it was just a really beautiful moment, right?
And it was
there.
even a small volcano.
Yeah.
And even large volcanoes are like, a pimple popping for us. It's like, but it's there's so much power involved, and it overwhelms us.
Yeah, and to realize that, you just experienced something that represented so much power. But, we had to go look I think we found NOAA had recorded it and released it as 2 sentences in their atmospheric report for that night. Mm-hmm. And that was the only, we knew it had erupted because it was all over our deck. But just to recognize that, the world keeps spinning. And maybe 2 or 3 people, witnessed something that was just beautiful and powerful, and just in the middle of the night in this great big storm, just this kind of.
You were one of those 2 or 3 people.
It's a pretty exciting feeling.
It reminds me of, if you're say a scientist and you've just discovered something no human has ever known before. You have that brief moment. I'm the only person in the universe who knows this.
That is, it's one of my favorite things when we're out there is going out and trying to climb a mountain. Mm-hmm. And you want to try to climb something that you can stand on top and stack a couple of rocks up and say, I may be the only person that's been here. It's my brother and I one time, same area, nearly burnt a mountain. We were messing around, we were like preteens and messing around with fire, and it was in the spring and the grass was all dead.
Yeah.
And on just some little island out there that I don't know anyone's ever been to, but we had the fire almost go out of control. We were using our jackets to beat down the grass. And we had this thought of like, oh no, we almost burned a mountain. But at the same time, who would have even noticed? No. Other than obviously the wildlife we would have just caused havoc for. But no, it's just a really special thing to be out there in a place where, there is a chance that you're the only one. I think about the researchers in like Antarctica a lot. Mm-hmm. How cool that must be to see stuff out there that's so alone. Mm-hmm. So.
Yep. Cool. So we got a big list here. What's another story?
All right, I'm just going to power through them. So these are just, just kind of thinking through stuff. So we'll see if there's any common thread. But when I think about moments fishing that just jump out of my memory, I think one of the brightest memories was there's a place called Duck Bay, Katoy. We call it the Hatchery. And it's on, I believe, a Fognak Island, but right next to Kodiak Town. Mm-hmm. And it is where the state runs a hatchery. So they release a bunch of fish that will then try to return to their quote-unquote river, but there's no river. Yeah. It's a hatchery, and then the fleet are allowed to really effectively harvest large volumes of pinks that are just kind of milling around in these bays. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen on Earth. Huge, huge spruce trees. Dark blue water, super steep rock, lots of these kind of pinnacles is what we call them, where it's just this finger of rock sticking up hundreds of feet off the bottom or 100 feet off the bottom. Wow. But we were making an opening. It was a flare opening, so everyone, instead of taking turns, just kind of fishes at once. And I think things had settled down and we were just kind of poking around. And we set, and my job at the time was to run the power skiff, which is a 18 by 12.5 foot aluminum bathtub with a Cummins 6BT, so the same engine they have in their trucks, but marinized. Mm-hmm. And it's just a little tugboat, and I think its ballard pull, it's like 2,600 pounds. Okay. How much force it can put down a tow line. Yeah. Anyway, so my job is to hold the far end of the net from the boat and then maneuver the net so we catch fish. So we make our set. We close it up, so that means I tow my end of the net back to the big boat. He tows to me. I hand him the end of the seine, and I start towing the big boat. And so I'm towing on the Millennium, and all of a sudden the corks, so the top half of the net, and it wasn't even the half, it was like the top, maybe 5 feet of a 40-foot deep net, just lift out of the water. Wow. And the bottom of the seine is not attached to them. It is gone. And I remember my dad looks at me, and he's, does the what's going on hands, and I'm looking back at him like
same hands.
I have no idea, man. I was watching the net. I don't know how this happened. And so we switched ends, and we went and grabbed the end of the net that was still stuck together. So then we had both the corks, the top of the net, and the leads, the bottom, and then we were able to pull the whole thing on. And somewhere during our set, we'd grabbed a pinnacle that was so sharp. Normally, if you snag, you'll see the top of the net sink.
Yeah.
Or kind of deform in a way that doesn't match the current, which tells you, like, oh, I've hooked up on the bottom. Nothing happened. It was so sharp, it just ripped the net in half lengthwise. And how do I describe it? I mean, the net is a 1/4 mile long, and it has about 3.5-inch meshes.
Wow.
And it's a web of 3.5-inch little diamonds that make up this seine. So if you think about how many strands were torn for 3/4 of a 1/4 mile long net, we're talking 300 yards of gear, 3 football fields of 3.5-inch
kind of like when you take scissors to cut the wrapping paper, you can slide it across.
But jagged, it wasn't, it was, and I remember we got the seine back on board, and we always debrief with the skipper, so I went up in the wheelhouse, and my dad, son, what happened? Dad, I don't know, man, I don't know, it wasn't my fault. He says, it's okay, we gotta. So we went into Kodiak and we laid that net out on City Dock on this great big concrete pad. And I remember we spent 3 days loading needles, mending back. I mean, you're talking about it's at least 600 yards of one knot every 3.5 inches.
Oh my gosh.
And we just sewed, just mended the net back together. I remember we found a basketball hoop. I don't remember where the hoop came from. We had some basketballs. And it was me and my brother and another kid that was about our age. I would have been like 13. My brother would have been like 15. The other kid was around there. And we would mend the net till we couldn't take it and then play basketball. And then mend the net. I remember we got absolutely tortured, so sunburned. It hurt to lay in bed at night because it was hot. It was summer, so we weren't wearing any shirts.
Oh, man.
And it's a beautiful memory, this just terrible tear we had in the net. But I'll never forget watching that net come up in 2 pieces, looking at my dad. I don't know. It wasn't my fault.
And then there's that we know we're going to be not fishing for several days. We know that puts us out financially. We know we got to mend the net for 3 days and play basketball just to move on. Big setback.
Yeah. It's funny, though. It's such a happy memory being set back there. Now, similar thing, less happy memory. I think the reason it was probably fun is because when you're fishing the hatchery, you're in a pile of boats fishing for a whole bunch of humpies. And humpies are fun because you catch a lot of them at once, but they only sell for, the most I think I've ever sold pinks for is 45 cents a pound, and the least is like 8 to 10.
Okay.
And I think at that time we're talking about maybe 10 cents. Now, our boat targets sockeye or reds. And they're the money fish. They're expensive. And there's a spot across from Kodiak over by the Chignik fishery. It's called Killikak. And it is one of the big dog spots. It's tough. There's a huge snag there. The weather can be terrible. But you can intercept reds that are running to Chignik. Kind of steal the neighbor's fish. And it's illegal, but, it's really advantageous to get there. And you have to travel about 20 hours, I think it's about 18 hours away from the island to get to the spot. It's the farthest kind of westward location that's a part of the Kodiak fishery. I guess Igvak's a little farther, but we lost that anyways. Anyways, we traveled out to Killikak, and there were about 4 boats. Reds were around $1.40 a pound. And we were getting to take a set every 2 hours. And we were getting 10 to 15,000 pounds of reds.
Wow.
On each of those sets. So every 2 hours, the boat's bringing in $15,000 to $20,000. And you can get in 10 sets in a day.
Wow.
So we're making it. This was like, you need a few of these days and you've made your season. And then the rest you can grind and scratch and you're home. And my poor dad with the line had been waking up in the wee hours to be able to get a good spot because you want that first morning set's the best one.
Yeah.
And he was just dying, and he came to me and he said, "Son, when thus and such boat, I can't remember which boat it was, pulls their anchor, wake up Miles and have him get us in line for our next set. So there's this etiquette. You're supposed to have your anchor up. You're supposed to be waiting near the set so that when your turn comes. But it's like a half an hour, 45 minutes of waiting around.
Yeah.
And if you're sleep deprived, that's valuable sleep time. Well, I had thought my dad told me to wake up Miles and have him make the set.
Okay.
And so I think I'm 13, 14, maybe younger, and I went to Miles and get up. My dad wants you to make the set. And Miles looks at me and goes, what? That's what he said, man. He goes, okay, Miles is a great guy. He's going to give it a shot. Well, when you're fishing Killicack, you're fishing between two horrific snags. Mm-hmm. And there's tactics. I mean, you have to know your tide. You have to, there's a lot you need to understand about what's going to happen and when you need to move your net, how you need to tow it, where it's safe to set. Because while the current might only be moving you half a knot, water weighs 8.8 pounds a gallon.
Yeah.
So when you think about the drag against this net,
all that netting material, yeah,
it wants to go. The fastest the boat can move the net with the skiff and the boat tolling flat out is maybe 0.1 knots.
Wow.
So it's like trying to hold back a glacier. I mean, there's so much energy there. And we make the set. I don't know what's going on. I'm in the skiff. Miles rocks down the purse, which is the bottom part of the set that does the work. It's all really strong line. There's a rib line down, they got your purse line down, they got your lead line down. This is a bunch of really strong material that's meant to lift up the bottom of the seine so you can roll the fish on board at the end. Yeah. And when that gets in the rocks, you are having a bad day. And I remember Miles tells me, we got to close this up, we got to close it up. We're really badly snagged. And we got the boat closed, but by then, it was game over. Half the seine was underwater.
Oh, wow.
Just terrible. And the seine works great in this beautiful oval, and you haul from one end. Mm-hmm. But if you snag up a piece of the seine, then that you can imagine dragging an oval across a snag, then the whole thing gets caught on itself, and all of a sudden, it's just bad. And I remember, Miles finally goes to get my dad up, and my dad comes out, poor guy. So sleep deprived in his underwear, looks out at his net. Half of it's underwater.
All because of a little miscommunication.
It's all because, yeah. And he looks at me. I remember him trying, because you hand talk to your skiff, and I remember trying to hand talk. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? What is happening to me? Oh, God, no. Oh, and I remember, we're realistically talking, $100,000 a day at least. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we ripped that net so bad. We ran down to Killicack. The fish are there. It's open. Manageable fleet. Snag up. Destroy the seine. Had to run 18 hours just to get back to the island, and then another 18 hours to get into Kodiak town. So kind of a less fun memory.
I remember in the last episode when you were talking about your dad, the yelling and that part of it, you could see why he got there.
Oh, man. And that's the thing, as a kid, I was so wounded by that memory of, what do you want me to do, man? I just did what I thought I was told. But now I can look back at, you have that opportunity and you're immediately thinking, first off, I can pay for Christmas. I can pay for maintenance. Mm-hmm. We got the house covered.
You're watching bills get paid while the fish is coming in.
Oh, man. And then, you get enough of those days, and now you're thinking about, I can save for next year. I can make necessary upgrades on my equipment. It's a really big deal. And then to have, never mind, we got to run 30 hours to mend the seine back together.
Because of one little miscommunication.
Oh, man, it's been healing to come to understand. I think the solution for me is maybe don't leave your child responsible to tell. Leave a note, write it down, leave a voice memo.
It's like that game of telephone, where the message gets distorted.
Oh, and poor Miles, he's just such a good guy, so you could see in his eyes when I said, it's your job, go make, I currently wouldn't haul gear at Killicack without somebody there to coach me through it.
Okay, wow.
So this is a guy who's, a skilled fisherman, but he's not even a skipper. And he's, sure, man, I'll do it if that's what he says.
But he obviously had misgivings.
Yeah. I remember my dad finally cooling off and, pulling me up. I remember he was in the crow's nest, all on the very top of the mast, and we were running out, and he was watching the fish move. It's his favorite spot to go and watch fish.
Yeah.
And he pulled me up there and he said, "Son, look at these fish. Sorry for being mad, but look what's happening here." "I'm sorry, Papa."
I'll put a fishing line in.
Yeah. So
Wow.
needless to say, for me, again, I don't want to, whatever, but there's a lot of for me, my fears, when it came to fishing, when I had, going into it as an adult, then there's this feeling of boy, you really don't want to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's something for me going in. I had a lot of anxiety early on about ripping the seine or getting snagged up. But the thing with fishing is you have to be confident and aggressive. So if guys are loading up at Killicack, it doesn't matter whether or not I feel comfortable with Killicack. I need to go put my net in the water and figure out how to fish it. And a part of that is things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So it's been a big area for me, working with my dad now as an adult, of growing into, okay, this is high risk. Mm-hmm. And the risk warrants, the benefit warrants the risk.
Yeah.
So I can think of one of my biggest mistakes recently was I made a set for fish that were backing out of the spot called Red River. It's all full of boulders, and we'd all waited for. The river was the river was in the closed area, but we were fishing just down current of the river mouth, and there's this line where you're legal to fish, and we knew there was a massive biomass of fish. We're talking 200,000 pounds of fish.
Wow.
So half of or a quarter of a respectable season are just swimming around outside of this
just
river.
Right there, yeah.
Mostly reds, money fish. This is good stuff. And I'm there, I'm waiting my turn, and as I'm waiting my turn, you see a fish jump, you see a fish jump, you see a fish jump, you see fish boiling, and pretty soon you realize this whole biomass of fish has washed into the legal fishing area. Mm-hmm. And the rules, the waiting your turn, everyone, when you wait your turn to fish, all of a sudden falls apart. And everyone gets to just go for it. It's just we're literally on the line between where you fish, battle fishing, combat fishing, and where you fish turns. Yeah. It's a gray area. And everyone who's there is a pretty high-level fisherman. And I threw my net in the water. There was so many fish that there was a spot where my leads and my corks had gotten the wrong side over each other. Oh. And when they popped the right way, I had 1,800 pounds of fish stuck in about 15 feet of net.
Just from flipping over.
Just from flipping over itself. So if I had gotten this net close, we're talking about an 80,000 pound set potentially. I mean, one of the guys had a set around there. And I snagged up on a rock. And I was so scared of being snagged, I let go of my set. And got my net back safe. And I, debriefing with my dad, and, "Son, you let go?" "Well, yeah." "Son, no." And I think, "Well, I don't want to lose my seine." And he goes, "Hold on, buddy, do the math for me. What are you catching a day?" And at that point, we were only catching 6,000 or 7,000 pounds a day of mixed fish. Yeah. So 25% money fish, 75% not. And we're talking about that one set was worth more than what I caught for the rest of the season.
Wow. And you had just let it go.
And I just let it go because I didn't want to rip my seine. Yeah. But if I had just been willing to take the risk and the damage to my gear, I'd have been able to spend the rest of my year fixing the seine. Yeah. And come out financially. I mean, we're talking 50 or 60 grand ahead of what I managed by playing safe.
Right. In that sense, it actually really wasn't too much of a risk, even if you had lost the net.
Right, but when you're sitting there watching corks go down, there's boats floating towards you, and you've got all these memories, there's this emotional imperative.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right? And so that's this whole balance is, I've got all this equipment, I need to be safe with it. But then there's times where the best move is to forget about it and catch your fish. You just go and catch the fish. So, the next year I come back and I made all these notes to myself. I love to learn, and I might experience a defeat or I might experience a loss, but if I can learn from it, nothing is truly lost because I can be constantly growing and educating myself. So I made this pretty brutal things I learned this year. And
but that things I learned this year is going to win you, major profits next time.
Exactly right.
Even more than if you had just not learned anything.
Right. And one of our big attitudes is, there might not be any fish to catch, but I can practice catching fish anytime it's legal fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So even if today's fishing isn't good, we're going to fish like it's the biggest fishing of the year because that allows me to be practiced and trained for when it finally is
and
big
your crew
fishing.
too, yeah.
Exactly right. It's all about training and practice and kind of learning, And that's one of the things with fishing that's so, I want to say addictive. It is because there's always something to learn. There's always room for development. It doesn't matter how good you are. You can always study and grow and add a trick or a wrinkle. It's kind of like football. Anyways, so then we fast forward a year, and after that set, I had really developed a kind of a hunger, I don't care. I'm going to make my set and I'm going to get my fish. And so we're sitting, kind of with the main fleet from my area outside of this set called Uyak. And, we all have a fleet channel. It's channel 6 on the VHF. Mm-hmm. And we all stand by and can kind of hear the community dialogue. Mm-hmm. So people are calling out, who's in line and is it my turn and which way is the tide going. And for a couple of days, there was this young, maybe 8-year-old humpback that was not very smart and liked to feed in the ebb water coming out of the bay. Mm-hmm. And he would swim up and down. There's these kind of 4 sets from Rocky Point to Cape Uyak, and this whale would swim around. And you'd hear on Channel 6...
Whereabouts of the whale.
Yeah. Hey, Rocky, the whale's back. Mm-hmm. And so my first, my set, I hear, hey, Rocky, there's the whale, and a couple guys chat, and the whale gets through the set. And then, I go around the circuit. I think there were 5 or 6 of us fishing Uyak. Mm-hmm. And just as I'm waiting to run in, so my skiff man's geared up, he's in the wheelhouse, we're all planning for the tide and getting ready for the set. The radio pipes up, hey, Uyak, Ellis, do you see that humpback? And fin whales are wonderful animals. They're smart, they're sensitive, so if you catch a fin whale, you can open your net and it'll swim back out of the opening in the net. It'll literally swim circles in your seine and be like, oh dear, and you open it and it'll leave. Gray whales, blue whales, they're not up against the capes, but humpbacks are belligerent, stupid whales. And I mean, there's a time when I was a kid, I believe it was Phil, but basically caught a whale, and the whale turned sideways, got stuck in the web, and then drowned, because these are oxygen-breathing animals. Right. And now he has maybe a 40 or 50 foot humpback, and we don't have the machinery or equipment to pull one of them on board. Yeah. That had rolled in his seine.
So that's a bad situation.
Oh my! Really there's bad. No way to solve. After you get your seine back in 8 or 9 pieces. Yeah. Big problem. Yeah. And this one's bigger, but equally dumb. And there's this etiquette there where we're all waiting turns. We each get a half an hour to hold the set. Mm-hmm. And because I'm not fishing, I'm waiting for you. I want to see you optimize your time. I want you to be efficient. I want you to be timely, and I want you to kill every fish you possibly can. Mm-hmm. Because that's money swimming by. No one wants to wait their turn to make money to watch you waste money. Mm-hmm. And so we all kind of stop for a second, and this humpback's out there in front of the set. He must have found something, but he's swimming in circles because he's a dumb whale. Not all whales are dumb, but he was. And we all waited for like 10 or 15 minutes for the whale to swim away from the set, and he doesn't. And so you can hear the fleet gets itchy, and the radio pipes on, and somebody goes, hey, Ellis, you're going to take your set. So here I am presented. We're fishing for maybe 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds of fish a haul. So pretty negligible fishing. Yeah. But it's also the best set happening. And all of my heroes are floating around me waiting for their turn, and I'm the guy. And so I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about, my notes. I've got this list of things. And one of the things is take the risk. Mm-hmm. And I looked at my skiff man, and I go, you know what? Let's make the set. And he looks at me and goes, Ellis, are we going to catch the whale? Yeah, we're going to catch this whale. And if we catch the whale, here's the deal. We're going to pull as hard as we can away from each other so the net's one big flat sheet, and it can just punch a hole through, and let's do it. So he goes, all right, man. And my crew are all kind of up in the top house like, oh, no. So we throw this set out, and I mean, 15 minutes, this whale's swimming laps a net length off the set. I mean, quarter mile just swimming. I lay my net out, and it just comes for the set. It's like it's waiting for me. So you can see it breach, and then you can see as it goes down, it'll exhale, and there will be this really smooth sheen on the water where its bubble pops.
Yeah.
And then it'll come up and it'll breathe. And sure enough, here comes the whale, and the radio pipes up, Ellis, you're going to catch the whale. And I'm absolutely panicking.
Like, what do you want me to do?
It's over. So I tell my skiff man, tow as hard away from me as you can. So you see the skiff start smoking, and I start towing hard at the beach. We stretch the net out, and the whale shows up on the wrong side of my cork line. So he's in my net, and he's got my web on his face, and he's coming up for air, which this is how they get stuck.
Yeah.
This is how they roll. This is how you wind up with your seine, in eight pieces. Yeah. And I mean, we must have looked so dumb out there, because all we need to do is just hold the net tight. But me and my nephew, the seine has belly to it. So, the cork line and the lead line will be straight between me and the skiff, but then there's extra web built in so that it can kind of billow like an old sailing ship sail.
Yeah, yeah.
And it has shape to hold the fish there.
Yeah.
Well, he's in that billow. And so me and my nephew, we try to pull backwards in the hopes that we can maybe like if you're shaking a sheet, pop that billow the other way.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I see 30 feet of corks just underwater.
Oh.
And I mean, my stomach drops. We're both towing, there's smoke. And then you see the whale pop up, swimming away. And we both, big deep breath, we're fine. Tow the net back into shape. Finish our set, haul the set. There's 1,500 pounds of fish in it. So we even got our fish. This is amazing. So I tell my nephew, I looked in the web. I didn't see a hole. He must have dove all the way under the seine. How cool, man. So then we go and make our next set, and there's like 20 fish in it. 100 pounds of fish.
Yeah.
Make our next set. There's like 20 fish in it. What's going on? And I look in the seine, and he had swum straight through the web. Why the fish stayed in the first set, I don't know. But it's amazing. It looked like, I know if you flew a Cessna, the prop would catch the web.
Yeah.
But it looked like somebody flew a Cessna through my seine. The cut was, like when we snagged
just
up...
a clean cut.
Beautiful. It was a beautiful cut. When we snagged up at Duck Bay, it was a big, jagged, tore on rocks. This was the cleanest tear I've ever seen in a seine. And we went out. It was dark by that time, got our fish off, dropped the anchor, and had to mend this seine. It was such a clean cut that it took me about 4 or 5 lengths across the deck, pulling the seine across the deck, stretching it out, and then mending that hole.
Yeah.
And when I got to the end, it lined up mesh to mesh.
Wow.
Like the whole hole, which is so impossible to do. But it was such it's actually one of my proudest memories, because the fish didn't matter. I wasn't getting big fishing, but just going and saying, you know what, we're going to do it, and it's going to go bad.
Yeah.
And
let's take the risk.
Yeah.
And it came out pretty good with that clean rig.
We didn't catch the whale.
You didn't catch the whale.
We were back fishing the next day. Only lost a couple hours of sleep. Well, I guess if I had noticed I had a hole, we wouldn't have maybe lost those sets. I could have fixed it. But, all in all, it was a big moment for me. It's
not a lot of people I know can say they caught a whale.
Yeah. It was, I had it in my net. Thank God I didn't, catch it, retain it, catch it. But,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful moment. It really was. That feeling, I'll tell you what, the feeling of making the set, that we're doing this, and then the feeling of seeing him come up in the gear. Oh my goodness, I've lost my set. What am I ever going to do? And then the feeling of watching him swim away and yes.
Yeah.
It's like, scoring a touchdown. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Pretty great moment.
So what next story on your list here?
Okay, so my favorite place, I think, in Alaska is Halibut Bay.
Okay.
You can probably look it up on Google Maps. It's perfect. It's got a great big sandy beach that's great to walk and hike on. It's got a good anchorage. It's fun to fish. There's a lot of fish there. There's normally not a lot of fleet there. There's halibut there, and there's deer and caribou. And it's my favorite place to deer hunt because there's no veggies. All the vegetation's about waist height tops. Most of it's calf height, so it's really nice hiking, which, if you go other places on the island, there's alders and there's pushki, and the veggies can be neck deep and miserable to try to move in. So when I was 7, my dad, we picked a bad day, and he goes, we're going to go deer hunting. We're going to go in Halibut Bay. And of course, he's hunted there his whole life. I shot my first deer there. We had a deer kick itself off a cliff there. So many memories of hunting. That's where I took my deer this year, was Halibut Bay. I took my kids hiking. And so as we're going in and we're talking about hunting, my dad starts into all of these bear stories from Halibut Bay. 'Cause there's a great big brown bear there. And he tells us this one about a family friend had taken a deer, and to move the deer off the mountain had lashed the deer's antlers to his backpack because he didn't want to field dress the deer and bag it. He just tried to drag it out. And when you do that, the head and the antlers and feet will get stuck on what veggies there are, and it'll stop you. And so then you kind of yank and pull, and it'll kind of free itself. And so there's this kind of
kind of struggle the whole thing.
Yeah. Stop, pull, stop, pull. Well, his name was Dave. And he stop, pull, stop, yank, 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 yank. Turns around, and there's a brown bear laying behind him with its paw on the deer. So his gun's on his pack, so he can't just draw. So he grabs his knife and cuts the rope. And just backs slowly away. And this is the thing, when I hunt with a revolver, and you have your head on a swivel, and the first thing you do is reload your rifle. Yeah. And your head's on a swivel because you don't want to get snuck up on, and because the crows come in and they'll start to circle and caw at your kill, and the bears see the crows and they come rolling in after the crows. Yeah. So we have all this conversation, and it's bear country, and so then my dad, being my dad, just kind of, let's go hunting. And so my brother's 9 or 10, I'm 7, and we go storming up this mountain. And we get up to the top of the mountain, and we look down the valley, and there's a herd of caribou. And the caribou, the bag limit, I think we could each take 2 or 3 of them, and there was 6 of us hunting. And the herd's only 12 caribou, so we can have the whole herd. We can take them all. So we all set up. I think there was 5 or 6 shooters, and we all set up behind this knoll. And a guy goes down with a red handkerchief into the valley where all the caribou are and scares them up. So the only place for them to run is past this knoll. And up they come, and boom, bitty, boom, 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 and one of them gets hit but still moving. And then my dad takes this one with a shot to the neck, and the thing tumbles a little bit. And most of the group go chasing off after the herd, kind of over the next ridge and down into a valley off the mountain. And my dad, we run to the caribou. He runs up. He wants it to bleed outright. So he slits its neck, or throat, and then pulls it head downhill. And then says to me and my brother, stay with the animal. I have to go make sure I haven't wounded anything. Turns his back and goes running over the ridge into the next valley. And my brother and I are sitting there, and it's quiet.
And you're remembering that bear story?
I'm remembering that bear story. The caribou's bleeding. A crow shows up. Papa! And we both went racing after my dad across the side of that mountain and down into the next valley. And it's funny, these are grown men running. And I cannot believe how fast we chased him down. Just 2 little kids hoofing it through the tundra. I've never been so scared of a bear in my life. But yeah, I'll never forget that. Never forget that hunt and that timely story there of dangerous bears around deer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's we had this tradition there where we'd take a bale of hanging twine, so a 5-pound roll of twine.
Yeah.
Chop a humpy into thirds, put 3 halibut hooks on the end of it and a lead ball.
Yep.
Throw it overboard, no pole. Just tie it off to the to the davit, and you'd wake up in the morning with 150, 200-pound halibut.
Wow.
And we woke up sometime, it may have been that year, but sometime around the same anchorage, we woke up with about a 250-pound halibut that had started swimming great big circles after it had gotten caught and had swum around the anchor line. And had had circled the anchor line no less than 100 times before it lost its energy.
Wow.
So then that next morning we had to go and hold the anchor
and unwind all of that.
And unwind so much twine off of the anchor line with a live halibut at the end of it. It was a beautiful day. Beautiful day.
Is halibut very profitable?
Yeah, that was, this year, that was where the fleet left me. That was where I got my great big breakaway. This year, I tripled my biggest season ever preceding.
Wow.
Because we just got left alone there, and the fish just came absolutely pouring through. There was no one there. So we just loaded the boat again and again and again and again by ourselves. It was really... I love it. It was my granddad's one of his favorite sets. It's one of my dad's favorite sets. It's it's just a beautiful...
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
You were telling me earlier about some of the issues you have with sharks. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this year there were so many sharks. There was a bunch of sharks up in Uyak where most of the fleet, that's kind of north, most of the fleet works north of where we work. Halibut's kind of down towards the south, and the fleet thins out the further south you go. And there were some up north, but man, we got down to halibut, and we had, I think consistently, we caught 4 or 5 sharks a day, and these are salmon sharks. So your little ones are 4 to 6 feet, and you can see them all the way up to 10 feet, which it's a big...
What kind of sharks are they?
Salmon sharks.
Salmon sharks, okay.
Yeah, don't quote me on this, I'm not a biologist, but they're from what I understand, the closest living relative to a great white shark.
Oh, okay.
They're just brown and eat salmon.
Okay.
They're beautiful animals, but they are cold-eyed, killing. I want to say mindless, but obviously I don't know the mind of a shark, but there's not
life. You were saying earlier, you look into its eyes, and it's like no soul in there.
They're dead, cold eyes.
Just dead, cold killers.
A bear is looking at you with curiosity, A shark is just, they're only receiving visual stimulus to target prey. They're just... And, this year we had a set where my nephew radios in, and he goes, "Hey, Ellis, we have porpoises in the Seine." And I'm way up against the beach doing what we call this trap set for fish that are moving shallow, and a lot of salmon really like to be shallow, so it's a really efficient set. But porpoises are open ocean animals. You see them when you're making long runs. You don't see them shallow ever. And he said, "I think we have porpoises." No, we don't. I think we got porpoises. No, Jeff, they don't come shallow. They don't do shallow. They're sharks. I don't know, man. These really look like porpoises, man. Okay, all right, cool. So we go to close the Seine, and he's, "Uncle Ellis, these are porpoises." And I look, and my goodness, there's 2 porpoises in my Seine. Now, as a fisherman, I love porpoises and storm petrels most.
What's a storm petrel?
They're these beautiful little brown birds that use the ground effect of waves to get free flight energy. And they're storm birds. And so they are in the worst weather. So when you're out there and you're afraid for your life and you're alone and all you can see is waves because you lose the horizon a lot and the boat's getting beat up, there's water everywhere, you'll see these beautiful birds just come smoking down the wave troughs. And they're happy. They live in storms. There's a lot of food in a storm. And so they're just these beautiful animals that are out there. Seagulls are kind of like ocean rats.
So you're all stressed out because of the storm and stuff, and you look over and there's these birds just happy as can be.
Yeah, just thriving. And they're really graceful. They're really beautiful animals. They're not like a seagull. It's kind of a blunt, kind of a dirty. But these things are gorgeous. You never see them eating garbage. They're just these really... So they're kind of your friend.
They like to find etiquette.
Yes. Well, porpoises are kind of like that. You don't see them in bad weather, but when you're way, way out, you'll hear... oh, there's porpoises. And when they'll see your boat, you can watch them from 100, 200 yards away, they'll see your boat and they'll turn and beeline for your boat because they play in the pressure effect of your bow.
Yeah.
So then you're way offshore, you're traveling between the island and the mainland, and here's porpoises, and they're rolling and they're playing, and they're beautiful, graceful little animals, really sweet.
Yeah.
And so these two animals are kind of a standout thing to a sailor like myself as your friends when you're deeply alone. They're like the reward for being way offshore or in bad weather. You get to see these animals. So I've got these porpoises in my gear, and I'm immediately, how do I save these animals? So we stop, I open up the net. Bless their hearts, they don't swim out. I hold my net open as long as I can, but they're scared of the boat. I mean, they're pretty sensitive animals, and something's wrong here. There's a lot of noise. They don't want to swim by my boat. So
they have to swim by your boat to get out.
Yeah, because we're bringing them, the boat and the skiff together. So you think about like this big circle that we're closing with these two boats, and they won't go out. So I tell my nephew, we're going to haul. We're going to haul as hard as we can, and we're going to get these animals out of the net. I don't want to hurt a porpoise. Just don't want to do it. Call my crew up, because I can haul back in about half an hour is kind of a standard. It takes you half an hour. A good boat consistently is getting their net back in 15 to 20 minutes. The fastest I've ever seen a net hauled was just under 10, like 7.5 minutes. Wow. And that's like the best fisherman I know. Mitch, I'll happily say his name, Mitch Keplinger. He's a hero. He's an amazing man. My record is 11.5.
Okay. So
there's this kind of margin.
Yeah.
And I tell my crew, guys, I want permission, because the deck crew have to work their chops off if I haul hard. I'm going to haul hard. I've got porpoises. Do I have your permission to beat you guys up to save these pretty ocean mammals? And my crew are 100%. Let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Just give us the beans. All right, sweet. So we close up the net. I come down on deck, and I just start smoking my gear back on board. Try again to get the porpoises out, but they won't. They don't want to leave the net. They're too scared. So I get the net closed up, get the rings up. So I lift the bottom of the net up next to the boat, and I'm hauling it all on board. And I see a big animal. And I think, there's a porpoise. And I look down, and no, this is a shark. It's about an 8-foot salmon shark.
Wow.
And no, sharks. It's God's creature. I don't want to harm a shark. It's just eating its dinner.
Yeah.
I caught it because I'm catching its dinner. But I don't like them. They're kind of pesty.
Yeah.
But I don't need to harm the shark, so I'm not going to harm the shark. And so I get the shark on, and I have 6 winches that can lift things vertically off my deck. But in this case, one of the winches is already occupied holding up the bottom of the seine. And I have another 2 winches that are occupied, ready to pull the seine on board at the end. So now I have access to 3 winches. So I grab this shark with the winch, and I yank it across the deck, and I get it on the water on the far side of the boat. But I'm trying to haul fast, so I don't cut the shark loose. It's just hanging there. Keep hauling, looking for the porpoises. One of them pops over the cork line, but the other one tries to dive under and gets stuck.
I don't know.
Yeah, so it can barely get its blowhole to the surface. So it's breathing, but at any point this animal can drown.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So I'm smoking through the net, and I'm looking at this little porpoise out there, and I hear my wife scream, "Ah!" And I look back, and there's another shark that has come up in the web next to my wife in the stern. And it's thrashing around and ripping up my net.
Can these things, I'm just stereotyping sharks here, but can they nab a person if they're flopping around?
They're flopping and biting. And I cannot imagine how one would get their foot out of a shark's mouth if it happened to get in. And so it lands next to my wife. It's pretty contained, but I want to get bit by a shark.
I've never flopping around and chomping.
He's biting and flopping, and we've messed with them with like broom handles and stuff, and they will either break or at least sink deep into, and then they grab and they whip and rip. So if you put your foot, you're losing flesh. It's just full blown. And I would say it's probably worse than a shark bite in the water, because they're either eating you, they're taking a bite and leaving, or they're feeling you out for food. This animal's going to grab and rip and tear.
Yeah, he's in total panic mode, and
So I jump back with another winch cable, and I winch this shark by the tail, but I don't have a strap, and I normally hang over and I'll cut the strap. So this one I grab and I hang it. So I've got 2 sharks hanging from the rigging.
just 2 sharks hanging outside of the boat.
No worries here. So then we keep hauling, trying to get to this porpoise.
You are, I gotta say, you're dedicated to these porpoises.
Well, I love these. I don't want to hurt.
Yeah, they're your friends out there.
Beautiful animals.
Yeah.
And here comes a third shark on board. And at this point, like, I'm starting to rant a little bit about sharks and how irritating they are and what are you doing in my gear, you dumb animal. And I run back there and I've used my third winch and I pull this shark out. Lo and behold, I wind up I had to do one more shark, but then I was out of winches. So I think the next one came up and me and the other crewman went, these are heavy animals. Mm-hmm. So this was 8 to 10 feet. And me and the other crewman went up and pulled the bottom of the seine, basically to trap him in a little corner of the gear, and then to roll him out over the cork line. So now we're sweating, our hands are hurting because you're pulling, I mean, I'd say probably weigh 800 pounds, and you're trying to roll this animal out. His teeth are getting caught in the web, and every time they do, he bite and shred. And so now I've got holes in all my net. And I finally pull down, and up comes this porpoise. Same kind of situation. He's bagged up, but he's twisted in the net. And we pull him up to the rail, and we got to get him up onto the deck so we can untwist him, and then back off the deck over the net. And the porpoises are small. They're maybe 400 pounds, 5 feet long, but it's a lot for two guys to handle. And it's funny because, you know, we've been handling these sharks, which are these cold-eyed, dangerous animals, and up comes this porpoise, and he's got like a couple little cuts in his fin, so he's bleeding. You know, he's obviously scared, he's obviously fatigued, but what was amazing is we started hauling him out, and he had the most beautiful, soft eyes. He's looking right at us. He's not fighting, he's not thrashing, but these are oxygen breathing animals. They're mammals. Yeah. So he's laying there in the deck in the net, and he's and so it's, you go from, you know, big dumb shark, get out of my face, get away from me, to this beautiful, bleeding, breathing mammal with great big beautiful eyes. And we sit there, and you know, you're immediately
just have that little moment with the porpoise. My pal, I've been laboring for you.
We're all talking super nice to him, like, it's okay, buddy, you're gonna be fine.
Meanwhile, the sharks are still hanging in the winches,
beating against the side of the boat.
Quiet, shark.
So we got him. We rolled him out. It's incredible. He didn't flap. You know, he didn't thrash. Nothing. Obviously, no fear about him biting. We're grabbing him around his head and stuff. Got him over the rail, and it was pretty scary. That little bit was touch and go. You know, he's kind of laying there. He's obviously really exhausted, but finally swims away. Me and the crew all literally stand, arms around each other's shoulders, and are like, "Oh, little buddy, swim away, our friend." And then we go to finish the set. I mean, I would have had about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of fish in the set. So definitely like a decent set, hard to roll. I go to roll the back, and there's the biggest shark of the set. And shark number 5, this thing's got to be like 10 feet. All my winches are full. Got a bag of fish on deck. I've got nothing for this guy. And I'm thinking like, oh, well, I'll just kind of roll the fish into the hold. And the shark, like, I don't know if he could smell the water in the hold or if he just saw something that wasn't the deck of a boat, but starts beating for the fish hold. So I grab a strap, I run across the deck, lasso this shark by his, wrap his tail, and he's thrashing. And these things are gigantic muscles, so now I'm getting my arms pulled out of socket, dragging a shark across the deck, and speaking fairly, uncharitably towards... didn't kill, didn't harm it, but boy, the end of that set wound up, you know, having to just sit there and throw sharks overboard. They all make it. They're tough animals. They can be out of water for like 45 minutes.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Scary animals. Definitely do not ever want to be in the water with one of them, but
I have before, but nothing scary happened. Yeah. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more short story.
Okay, let's see.
We'll make it our last one.
Yeah, let's see here. Oh, here we go. So we'll do one more just because we're on halibut. We thought it was a shark. Okay, so I think we're down towards Red River, kind of further south. Not that anyone knows where these places are. But we're fishing up against a beach outside of a river. And the rivers have a really funny effect on halibut because the fish swim up into spawn, but then the current will wash a fair amount of fish carcasses back out. Mm-hmm. And so outside of Red River, outside of Carlick, you'll see, it's where I've caught the biggest halibut I've seen in my life, have been outside of spawn rivers. Feeding on,
because that's their food there.
Yeah. It's, I mean, they're at the bottom of the trash. What do you want to call it? The trash compactor, whatever, you know. And they're feeding on the garbage coming out of these rivers. Once in a lifetime experience. We're hauling the gear back. We got the rings up, so the bottom of the net's next to the boat, and our corks. How do I express this? I would say you have about a life jacket worth of flotation every 2 feet of net. Okay. So you could very easily float most of your body on a body length of these corks. Okay. So there's a lot of buoyancy here because it's meant to hold up this gear with thousands of pounds of fish in it, right? Right. And we start seeing 10 to 15 foot sections of corks dive underwater. Wow. Which, like the porpoise, for example, could only pull down 2 or 3 corks. At a time. Mm-hmm. So when you're seeing 10 to 15 feet of corks going down,
there's something massive.
Something big is in the seine. And so we're all thinking, you know, maybe it's a sea lion, probably a shark. There's a lot of sharks outside Red River. And so we're hauling, and you see the corks dive, and you see the corks dive, and you see the corks dive. But nothing's coming of it, so we just haul. And we roll the bag on board, and you just see a geyser of salmon in the bag get thrown into the air. I mean... talking 15 or 20 fish just get launched, and then you hear this just boom on the deck. And the next fiberglass, I mean, it's 2.5 inches of glass. Yeah. But fiberglass is flexible, so you can feel like you're standing on a drum. This pounding in your feet. And it's just geyser of fish pounding in your feet. Geyser of fish pounding in your feet. And we're all, you know, what's in the seine, man? You know, so we're all pretty interested. And we go and we dump the fish, and there is... the biggest halibut I've ever seen, period. Wow. I mean, my friend Miles was... we didn't have a scale on the boat, so I don't know its weight exactly. We estimate it was high 300 pounds. Miles was 6'6", and the halibut was a couple inches longer than him laying on the deck.
I can't even imagine.
We ate that fish for like 2 or 3 years. I mean, seriously, a family of 9. That fish fed us for a long time.
Guess what's for dinner again, kids?
I mean, that guy nearly filled the freezer. He was huge. And what was incredible is we get this fish up, we hang it by a winch to get it out of the deck so we can get all the fish in the hatch. Get all the fish in the hatch, close the cover, and... Miles and Preston, 2 of the guys on board, went up and just being young dudes, immediately did the boxer pose in the punching bag, right? So Miles punches this halibut in the stomach, and out pops a salmon, a whole, fresh salmon. This halibut was at the surface. Halibut are bottom feeders and the scavengers. This halibut was at the surface vacuum feeding on entire salmon. And so we were
so big he had to upgrade to just the finest fish at the surface.
Yeah, he climbed the food chain in his life. Like, this is a remarkable animal. And we Miles, you know, punch, ouch pops a fish. And so I remember we all stopped and we stared at each other and yelled at my dad to come down from the wheelhouse, like, look what happened, man. Huge fish. And someone else, I think it was Preston, pop, punches, and out comes another fish. And we're all like, oh my goodness, what's the game now? Well, punch the salmon out of the halibut.
Like a vending machine.
Like a vending machine. So we did it. So the first 4 fish that come out are all pretty, we call it ocean bright. You know, they look like they've just been swimming. And the last 2 fish were mildly digested, little pale, little white-eyed. So I looked at you, well, what do a bunch of salmon seiners do with 4 ocean fresh? Well, you put them in the fish hold and sell them. And so for the rest of my life, I've thought about someone sitting down in a fancy restaurant and eating one of those salmon. I don't know if that makes me that's a bad person thing, but boy, it's been a fun thought to have, is that someone somewhere probably ate
Someone somewhere is asking, may I ask the chef why my salmon tastes like halibut?
Extra fishy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What an experience. I've never seen halibut. You know, it's like in Homer, which is a really classic halibut place. They've got a wooden sculpture of one of the record halibut that were caught there. Yeah. And this fish was bigger than that. And I so wish, you know, if it had been a sports fish, we would have immediately weighed it. And I wouldn't.
There's a halibut at the Anchorage airport. When you come down, there's these escalators you come down if you're arriving. And it's where, like, the families greet because they see, you know. And right around there, there's this a halibut that's been taxidermied. And it says something like it was a record at one time or something like that. Yeah. And that's the one I'm thinking about when you tell this story.
I was 11, I think, 11, 12, somewhere that, like, tween age, you know, when you make all these memories. And I remember thinking it was funny to stick my boot in its mouth because my whole foot fit in this thing's mouth. And I'll tell you what, that fish was not dead yet.
Yeah.
And it closed its mouth on my boot.
Really?
Yeah. And I could not get my foot out of that thing. It started thrashing, and I was just stuck laying on deck being thrashed around by a halibut. And it tore up my boot, and I had to get a new pair of boots.
Wow.
It's just a remarkable animal. You know, on some level, you know, you look back and you think, like, boy, what a shame, you know, to take something that big. I will say it was, you know, harvested and eaten, and we realigned the food chain.
Yeah.
For appropriate function. Sharks at the top, halibuts, you know.
And the human.
Yeah, but wow, what a memory. I'll never forget that fish.
And now that you are, you know, continuing with the commercial fishing business, you have more stories to tell. You know, I just think about your children. If they continue to go on the boat every year, one day they're going to be sitting with some guy with a podcast telling stories that you produced by your fishing times.
Yeah.
You know, and how sweet and special that is. But of course that involves, you know, going out there and taking those risks.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you seen Fury, that tank movie?
No, I haven't.
There's this thing where, you know, I don't want to spoiler it, but it goes pretty rough for these guys, and they're a tank crew fighting for their lives. But there's all these moments where things are going terrible for them, but they're struggling together as a brotherhood for a common goal, and they'll look at each other and say, "This is the best job I've ever had."
Yeah.
And that's so, you know, when me and my crew watched that together, we were all, you know, sniffles and grabbing each other by the... Because, you know, it's that same kind of a thing of like, man, there's so many moments that you can look at and say, why am I here? Why am I, you know, doing 12 hours and 35 knot winds? But then it's the best job I've ever had. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a wonderful place, you know. Even the stuff that doesn't ever make a great story, it is enough to really fuel you. And then you add in just the kind of craziness you get to experience. And, you know, how many people get to be, you know, fighting to save a porpoise's life and exasperated, you know, at seeing sharks. It's like every year the greenhorn's like, whoa, shark, can I get a picture of it? And then by the end of the season, you're like, not another one.
Not another one, yes. Yeah, not a lot of people can say that. But it's like those extraordinary choices you make to step out of the norm is what has been the most enriching thing. I don't know, as men, like, adventure and danger and risk-taking is just somehow in our DNA. We crave it, we want it, even though it can kill us or it can hurt us or it does something to us. It fulfills us. We're just wired that way.
Definitely makes the fall a peaceful and relaxing time of year. You know, there's a cycle. It's like every October, you know, I just want to like sleep a lot.
Well, yeah, you were telling me that earlier.
Yeah.
When the fishing season's done, it's kind of transitioning to winter, and I just want to be home.
Yep, just leave me alone. I don't need to see anything. And then you get to Christmas. And like right now, the fleet's all going out to fish dungeons. We're going out crabbing. And I'm seeing all my buddies posting pictures of their boats back in the water. And it's...
So it's coming back again.
Oh, man. I really wish I was crabbing right now.
Yeah.
I don't have the permit to do it. But, man, I'm sitting here being like, boy, why didn't I buy a crab permit when those are cheap, man? I really want to get out there again. And by the time we hit June, you know, it's going to be... I can smell it. I can hear the seagulls. Oh, my man.
Yes.
I love it.
Well, Ellis, thank you very much for man, taking another hour or so to tell some more stories.
I hope they're fun for people.
I hope so. I like having episodes like this that are just fun. I have a lot of serious ones, but like I really want to do more of these just fun ones, storytelling. I mean, Alaska produces stories. That's part of living here. Yeah. And so, thank you for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, I'm really afraid I may have come off as just a killing machine, but
there's no doubt all of us are going to think that's what you want.
That's 30 years. That's 30 years of standout moments, but yeah.
Well, you were saying earlier that you preserve the lives of sharks, unlike many other fishermen, when they get sharks in.
Yeah, it used to be standard to cut their tails off because they're a nuisance. But I gotta say, I love God's given me such an opportunity to live in such an amazing world with so many amazing animals, and I think I'm first at the line. I want to see the salmon return every year. Yeah, I want a stable ecosystem. Yeah. The sharks are a positive part of that ecosystem that applies selective pressure to the salmon,
we need that tension within the, I don't know what to call it, the circle of life, like to steal from Lion King. Yeah. But we need that tension for things to go on.
Yeah, and God made that shark. So, it's his creature. I'd be pretty foolish to not treat it with respect. Yeah. I will say things that are edible tend to become eaten, such as that beautiful halibut, but, this is the way of... feeding one's family. So
all right, well, Ellis, thank you for taking the time, and maybe we'll have you back on the podcast again sometime.
I'm sure I can come up with at least another couple stories.
Sounds like you can. Thanks, Ellis.